You would
The
destroy it?
occult analyst pried
only
at the
way.
loosened plank with a flat, bladed chisel while Matteo held a tallow candle so close the wax softened at the edge. Suspicion tightened the analyst's jaw as the metal scraped wood, and on the third lift, a folded disc of parchment slid free and struck the candlelight. Matteo made a small sound. Giuseppe, look, Matteo. The parchment unfolded flat between them, and the central glyph caught the flame and threw a thin, cold sheen across the workshop table. Within those first breaths, the problem presented itself. A diagram claiming to map the architecture of the heavens had resurfaced here, in their hands, and it changed what the men around it believed possible. The discovery forced an immediate question into the room. What would one do with a map that rewrites the sky? He kept his hands steady. The occult analyst wore the coat he always wore to long nights. High collar up, linen sleeves rolled at the wrist, a brass astrolabe heavy on the table next to where he worked. He was mid-40s, lean, pale olive skin, dark hair slicked back with a stray curl over one temple. A thin scar marred his left eyebrow. He smelled of beeswax and old glue. Those details mattered because he moved with a practiced economy. Measurements before conclusion, copies before judgment. He tapped the grimoire with a ringed finger, not yet certain whether curiosity or duty would guide him. The suspicion in his mouth tasted like iron. Matteo shifted, and the candlelight trembled. Matteo, younger and quick-fingered, crouched to peer. Matteo, the analyst said, though he used the name like a short command. Matteo answered with a whispered, "It is round. See the concentric marks." Lucia came out from the inner study with a stack of ledgers. Her skirts whispered on the stone. She did not ask for a report. She checked the date inked in the margin and frowned. The group had been cataloguing late copies of Paracelsian notes all week. This find belonged to no known hand. The presence of unfamiliar glyphs made Lucia's fingers go cold. Her face tightened. She did not yet speak the word fear, but her breathing shortened and her hands hovered over the parchment as if to prevent it from slipping away. They worked at the table under a single candle. The occult analyst laid the disc flat. The outer ring contained small place names and tally marks. The inner rings displayed sigils drawn with a steady hand. Between the rings, someone had ruled faint, impossible geometry. He traced a line with a bone ruler. "This contradicts accepted celestial order," he said, watching Lucia's eyes for a sign she would laugh him off. Lucia did not laugh. "Giuseppe, it mentions names I have seen only in burned inventories," she said. She pulled a ledger closer and flipped pages with deliberate, sharp motions. Her fingers found a burned entry and held the edge like a proof. They had both read the same fragmentary accounts. Destroyed diagrams, sudden disappearances, practitioners who repented and cut their own scripts. Their scholarly curiosity turned into alarm when Lucia read aloud a margin note appended in a cramped hand. 3 vanished names linked to towns within a day's travel. Lucia, the occult analyst softly, "Those towns." 2 disappearances last winter. Lucia's hands tightened on paper. Matteo met the analyst's gaze and said, "We could copy it." The analyst felt an internal shift. Curiosity to obligation. He thought of records left to future students. He also knew how knowledge could be used. The tension between recording and erasing sat between them like a physical object. A knock at the front door split the room. Signor Vieri stepped in with a carriage coat, still wet from rain. He smelled of iron and rich wine. "I hear you have something of interest, Vieri," and his hand rested on a small pack at his hip. "Signor Vieri," Lucia answered, and the greeting carried no warmth. The analyst placed a finger along the diameter of the diagram and slid it toward the center. It was beneath the floor. Matteo. Vieri's eyes flicked to the astrolabe beneath the floor. "People hide contraband there." He smiled a tight, controlled smile. "How much will you take?" The arrival raised the stakes. Vieri's manner implied patrons who did not tolerate delay. He offered coin in a way that suggested more than money. Protection, removal, silence. The occult analyst, "We are scholars, Signor Vieri." "We do not sell." Vieri's jaw hardened. You will sell what you have, or you will lose more than the parchment. He did not speak a threat in florid terms. He listed names of collectors who had influence over the town's magistrates. His voice was low, sure. Lucia folded her arms and said, "You are ordering us." They argued quickly. The conversation moved in clipped exchanges that revealed what each feared and wanted. Vieri wanted the diagram. Lucia wanted safety. The analyst wanted both truth and a way to keep everyone alive. After Vieri left with a promise to return at dawn, they set the parchment back on the table and worked through the night. Matteo lifted a translucent overlay, an onion, skin of vellum someone had prepared for measurement, and set it carefully above the diagram. Candlelight crossed the overlay and the geometry appeared that had not been visible before. Thin, luminous lines aligning with place names and small radiant points at intersections. Their hands trembled as they traced the lines. Matteo, steady, the occult analyst. Matteo's lips moved. He was whispering numbers. As Matteo slid the overlay into perfect alignment, something in the center reacted. The central sigil brightened with a cold, inner light and threw a lattice of pinprick stars into the air above the table. Matteo cried out and sagged forward. Lucia grabbed his shoulders and tried to keep him from falling. The analyst lunged and shoved a cloak beneath Matteo's chin. Matteo's eyes rolled up. His fingers clawed at the air as if trying to stop a memory. That moment was the chapter's pivot. They had moved from intellectual peril to physical crisis. Lucia grabbed the candle and splashed wax onto Matteo's hand to shock him. She slapped his cheek twice. "Matteo! Matteo!" she shouted, the room filled with concrete motions and immediate logistics. "Clear the table, fetch water, check pulse." They reacted with hands, with orders, not with metaphors. During the collapse, the overlay fell, sliding across the table and revealing beneath it a list of names that matched the marginal tally. The analyst read them aloud, voice steady and factual. 2 names from the ledger, followed by 3 names that Lucca recognized as vanished practitioners. The list included dates. This links the diagram to the disappearances. Lucia, and the syllables carried the weight of a conclusion. Their emotions shifted. Alarm became fear. The analyst felt his palms sweat around the grimoire at his belt. He moved to the brazier in the courtyard and struck a flint to life. He thought, in quick practical measures, that destroying a fragment might stop further harm. They argued in the courtyard. Lucia picked up a burning fragment and held it over the brazier. "Destroy it now," she said. "Lucia, we must copy first," the occult analyst replied. Their exchange sharpened into rapid fire, 3 to 6 lines of back and forth that revealed deeper priorities. "Giuseppe, you would endanger others for a note." "Lucia, can you deny being a scholar?" "I am not saying preserve danger, then what would you have us do?" Matteo whispered, voice thin. Lucia's hands shook. The brazier's flame orange and undecorated took the edge of her sleeve, and she frowned at the tiny burn. Their conversation mixed with tasks. Lifting tools, fetching glue, flattening fragments for copying. The debate forced each to choose: transparency and record, or secrecy and immediate containment. Matteo intervened with a small but decisive action. He folded the overlay and moved to clip it to parchment for tracing. "Matteo, Lucia, stop." His fingers trembled. He answered, "I can copy the lines." "Then we decide." The analyst looked at the boy's face and measured the cost of authority. He chose to let Matteo work, an intentional shift from doubt to controlled risk. As Matteo bent to trace, the diagram responded again. The central sigil flashed, sharper this time, and a lattice of light struck Matteo's forehead like a sudden, cold pressure. He made a sound that was not a word and fell back against the table, vomiting a thin liquid that smelled metallic and of copper. Lucia recoiled and gagged once, then steadied herself. The analyst slammed his palm on the table and knelt to check Matteo's breath. They had crossed into physical harm. The immediate containment was practical and uneven. Lucia seized a brazier pan and fed it with scraps of parchment, setting one smoldering sheet into flame while the analyst slipped a folded scrap into his grimoire. He did not look at the symbol as he closed the book. He only felt the paper's texture beneath his finger. His choice was deliberate. He would keep a single fragment for later study under controlled conditions. Lucia spat into the pan and held a pair of tongs with hands that left blackened oil along her knuckles. Matteo slept an uneven sleep on the bench, brow sweat streaked. Their actions showed their feelings, no speeches, only handling, only the sound of cloth against metal. The fear at night translated into motion. They moved, they burned, they hid. They divided the remaining pieces that could be separated. The analyst took the smallest, oldest, seeming scrap and tucked it inside his grimoire under a sewn-in pocket. Lucia kept a larger portion and wrapped it in oiled cloth. Matteo insisted on carrying the overlay in case the lines could be copied elsewhere. He clutched it like a talisman even as his hands trembled. Each choice shifted the group's cohesion. The analyst's decision to keep a fragment produced a quiet fracture between him and Lucia. She watched him with a look that mixed accusation and necessity. He did not defend the act with words. Instead, he wrote a short, oblique note in the margin of a ledger and slipped the page into his coat pocket. At dawn, as the sky paled and shutters were still closed, the occult analyst moved through the workshop with slow, practical gestures. He placed the brazier tool back on its peg. He straightened a crooked astrolabe. He set a final, careful line of notation beside the copied overlay. Outside, beyond the shuttered windows, Signa Vieri stood in the street under a light rain. He did not approach the door. He remained as if guarding a purchase already made. The analyst felt that presence without looking, and then he saw Vieri through a slit in the shutters. Vieri nodded once, slight and precise. It was not the nod of a neighbor. It was a closure. The analyst pocketed the salvaged scrap and wrote one more line to mark provenance. He folded the ledger in a practical manner and put the quill back in its cup. They had resolved the chapter's immediate conflict. No sale, a partial destruction, a secreted fragment, and a boy who had been struck by the diagram. The analyst's choices had consequences. Matteo would need time to recover. Lucia would insist on stricter containment, and Vieri's nod meant the network had noticed. The emotional texture at the end held unease and a practical acceptance. They exchanged no speeches of fate. "Lucia, we are not safe yet." The analyst closed the shutters and answered, "We will move tomorrow." Matteo woke and murmured a few words about stars. He could not explain the images he had seen. The final action in the room was the occult analyst, sliding the salvaged fragment into his coat and buttoning the pocket with a practiced hand. He felt the paper beneath his palm, and outside a soft, deliberate nod echoed once more against the shuttered wood. That nod became the chapter's last sound. Emotion root. Suspicion seeded the chapter and drove the analyst to pry the plank and to keep one fragment rather than destroy all. Emotion shifts occurred multiple times. Suspicion to alarm when the ledger matched names, alarm to fear when Matteo collapsed, and fear to grim resolve when they burned fragments and hid one. These shifts existed through actions, tightened jaw, hands that shook while handling fragile parchment, slaps to wake a collapsing apprentice, not through vague feelings. Dialogue carried the pressure of choices and revealed relationships. Lucia's voice was clipped and duty-bound. Matteo's voice was young and unsure. Signa Vieri's voice was economical and threatening. The occult analyst's responses were measured and practical. The chapter left specific consequences in place. Matteo required care and would remember images he could not yet describe. Lucia demanded a plan for containment and refused to allow the analyst to keep more than a single fragment without oversight. Vieri's presence suggested external interests and hinted at patrons who would move faster than scholars. The diagram itself now existed in three forms: a burned ash in the brazier, a copied overlay stored under Lucius' watch, and a small original tucked in the analyst's grimoire. Each form changed the problem the group faced. the last line of the chapter tied to a tangible beat. The occult analyst closed his coat over the fragment and, through the shutters, watched Vieri step away into the rain, nodding once as if a transaction had been concluded. The chapter concludes not with an abstract reflection, but with movement that introduces the next set of decisions. The analyst set his pen down, tightened a ribbon on the grimoire, and lifted the shutters a fraction to breathe the damp morning air. He heard the rain strike the street. He turned the key on the iron clasp and stepped out to the courtyard, carrying the weight of the salvaged scrap and the certainty that those names in the margin would not go unanswered. That step closed the chapter on a concrete action and left the group organized around a single, dangerous truth. They possessed knowledge that others wanted, and that possession already had a price. The occult analyst snapped the brass clip, lifted the translucent overlay, and a sigil along the diagram's inner ring flared like a slow ember. Matteo cursed and stepped back, tripping over a chest and knocking over a jar of quicklime. Suspicion tightened the analyst's hands as he forced the overlay higher, studying how thin graphite lines beneath the vellum pulsed, where the overlay's etched pattern intersected them. He did not speak for 2 heartbeats. Matteo spat a breath of contempt and said, "This should have been burned when we found it." The room smelled of beeswax and ashes. Suspicion had driven their first choice the night the disc appeared, and it pushed at them again now. Within 5 sentences the problem stood naked. The diagram suggested a map of correspondences that altered how an alchemist might match formula to sky, and someone in the workshop had an interest in keeping that map secret. The occult analyst had been certain only of 2 things when he pried open the floorboard last week. The disc belonged to someone who feared discovery, and the disc's owner had hidden it under the workshop plank for a reason. He referenced the loosened plank with a brisk motion, tapping the edge where the chisel had slipped. Matteo's lip curled. "You folded, not layered. Matteo, you a simple disc. This has overlays." The analyst opened his mouth, then closed it, because the overlay itself had altered the stakes. The analyst was mid-40s, lean, grey, green eyes pinning every line as if they were alchemical regents. He kept his voice low, measured. "Matteo, hold the candle at arm's length," he directed. He did not explain the grading of risk. Matteo had seen manuscripts burned to embers for less. Outside the window, the rain picked up and slapped the glass in clean beats. That sound pushed action back inside the room. It never softened what they had found. A short, hard knock announced Brother Ambrose at the door. He had a key. Brother Ambrose entered with his robe still damp, the hood thrown back to show a square jaw and a thin salt and pepper beard. He carried an astrolabe on a leather strap. "You lit a fire in the workshop, Ambrose," and the single sentence revealed accusation and purpose. He set the astrolabe on the table and spread his fingers over its brass face, like a man claiming a relic. "You risked the convent's reputation." The analyst raised one eyebrow. "Ambrose, we recovered the disc from beneath the planks. We should examine it here, not toss it to the flames without record." Ambrose's jaw tightened. "Then examine it with eyes that do not stir the heavens. Or we will burn it ourselves." Dialogue stayed tight. Matteo snapped, "Burn it and be done." "We are not gods to redraw the sky," Ambrose replied. "We are custodians, Matteo." "Custodians do not let dangerous diagrams escape." The analyst watched both men and registered, in Matteo's hands, a deeper agitation. An index finger rubbed at a fresh ink stain on his wrist. The analyst's suspicion turned to unease. The ink and the eagerness to destroy were not the same impulse. An overlay test became the ritual of the morning. The analyst placed a brass astrolabe ring over the diagram's outer rim. He spoke in short statements as he worked. "Hold that brass steady. Rotate the ring 3 degrees clockwise. Matteo, steady the candle." Matteo complied, but his hands trembled, and he kept looking at his stained wrist. The analyst's fingers brushed the vellum to flatten a curl. At the point where the overlay's intersecting arcs crossed the pale ink, A faint voice rose in Matteo's throat. Do you see it? He did not mean the sigil alone. He meant the alignment that appeared when the astrolabe's shadow fell across the diagram. The analyst's Sunnis shifted to curiosity. He ran a small compass over the parchment. The overlay was not merely decorative. The translucent sheet carried a grid of micro-etchings. When aligned, those etchings connected a sequence of sigils with lines that ran beyond the parchment's edge. Matteo, that's not a sky map, it's a schedule, Ambrose laughed. The sound-dry schedule of what? Alchemical appointments. Matteo's expression hardened, of appearances. Of when certain houses move. The marks line up with months and with family crests. The analyst leaned forward. His pulse picked up, but he kept his voice even. Show me the crest you mean. Matteo pointed to a faint flourish in the diagram's south quadrant. They worked in short motions, fingers and brass, breath and suit. Lucy arrived without announcement, wiping rain from her sleeves. She had been a student of the analysts for a decade, known for steady hands and skepticism. You left the plank loose, she said, looking not at the parchment but at the spot on the floor where the disc had been hidden. You know what that says about who hid it here? Lucius' point was blunt. Someone in their circle had panicked. The analyst remembered the plank. He had pulled at it with a chisel and seen the folded disc strike candlelight. The memory pressed against the present with a cold hand. He quoted the detail aloud to ground the discussion. The discs struck the candle when I lifted the plank. Lucius' eyes narrowed. And someone in this workshop prepared for discovery. They did not want others to find this map. Her voice carried accusation specific enough to land. A small event happened then. Matteo opened his palm to show a barely visible crest tattooed in ink along his thumb side. I have this because of my father's patron, he said. He swallowed. It means nothing now. Lucius' gaze went to his hand and then to his stained wrist. The room tightened around action. The analyst said, Matteo, explain the ink. He did not say you lie. He demanded proof. Matteo moved, looking away, then met both their eyes. My father asked me to watch for papers with that sign. He thought he could profit if a map ever named the houses that control the roads to the south. That was a confession that changed stakes. Suspicion flickered into betrayal. The first emotion shift had arrived, suspicion to unease to betrayal. The analyst recorded it mentally and let action follow. Ambrose, lock the outer door. Lucia, bring the lantern. Ambrose moved without question. Lucia bent to fetch the oil lamp and returned with hands steady. The analyst lifted the overlay again and aligned it to a constellation mark scrawled in the margin. He read aloud the marginalia because reading it out loud made it real. When the third comet draws blood, the southern line opens to the house of Menace. Matteo's mouth went dry. My father watches Menace. He would kill for that line, Lucia muttered. Then we must understand whether the diagram names the houses or schedules movements. That difference decides whether we publish or purge. The words published and purge were not poetic. They were options that required an immediate choice. They tested the overlay against the astrolabe. The analyst rotated the astrolabe and watched how shadow lines traced the diagram's nodes. At a particular angle, revealed lines converged not on stars, but on small letters tucked into the parchment's warp. Those letters spelled dates, names, and what looked like shipment routes. Ambrose stepped back, voice shallow. This is not cosmology. This is logistics tacked to celestial observing. Lucius' hands stilled. If someone mapped trade routes to celestial events, they could predict convoys, rituals, even ambushes. Matteo's shoulders hunched. The analyst felt the threads of danger tighten. A mid-chapter mini. Cliffhanger occurred when the analyst lifted the overlay fully and discovered a secondary sheet stitched beneath the main disc that had not been visible before. Its corner bore a burn mark with ash fused to the edge. He looked at Matteo, who stitched this. Matteo's reply came as a whisper. Not me. The question landed like a stone. That hidden sheet changed every earlier assumption. The analyst's suspicion curdled into fear for a moment. Not the abstract kind, but a physical constriction in his throat and a taste of iron on his tongue. He cleared his throat and spoke, even though his hands shook. "We must unpick the stitches." Carefully, that was a decision and it required tools. They worked in a rhythm of short sentences and deliberate motions. Lucia cut a faced stitch with a small needle. Ambrose held the parchment flat with a leather pad. Matteo little, but he hovered with a clenched jaw. The secondary sheet slid free, and ink on that sheet listed names plainly. Houses, merchants, and a column marked with a symbol the analyst recognized from a broadsheet once displayed in the marketplace. House Marissi. He read, House Dervan. House Court. And here he tapped a line of runes that matched the tattoo at Matteo's thumb. Matteo's hands closed around the table's edge. He whispered, "I told you nothing. I had no part in the stitches." Ambrose's eyes narrowed, then who did? The analyst paused and followed the thread back to the plank. He remembered a scrape on the wood, a thin dark smear he had not examined the first night. Now it could be sewing residue or old varnish. He forced himself to say the next question without inference. Who else entered this workshop 2 nights ago? Silence filled the space where answers should be. Matteo's gaze dropped to the ash, stained burn in the sheet's corner. "My father's messenger visited the market 2 nights ago," Matteo after a long beat. "He left a coin under the table for someone to fetch if the disc appeared." "I thought it only a rumor." Lucia caught that misstep immediately. "You did not tell us because you wanted the coin to be claimed, or because you feared what would be found." Matteo's mouth tightened. "Because I thought I could control it." That admission moved the plot forward and exposed motive. The second emotion shift arrived. Betrayal blurred into fear and then into anger. Ambrose's face reddened. "You risked everything for a coin?" he asked. Matteo snapped. "Do you think I wanted to risk the convent? My father sent him. He promised protection." Ambrose barked. "Protection you do not own. You took a gamble with other people's lives." Lucia stepped between them and said, "Stop. The map does not care for our quarrels. We have a sheet that names houses and dates. The question now is who stitched the sheet and why they expected someone here to find it." The analyst's jaw set. He had to move beyond accusation to evidence. They followed a small lead. The ash fused to the burned corner. Lucia fetched a glass vial and collected a flake of fused ash. The analyst smelled it, then labeled it with a neat scratch on a scrap of paper. Ambrose consulted the astrolabe for an angle that would have produced such a burn if the parchment had been held at a particular inclination to candlelight. He spoke in clipped phrases. If the burn occurred at 47 degrees, the person who burned it stood near the north window. Someone could have set the ember with intent. Matteo's eyes flicked to the north window. "No one has used that window for years," he said. Lucia countered. "Someone did 3 nights ago, when the market runs late." The small discovery forced them to check the latch and find a thin smear of mud on the sill. That mud matched a boot print that Ambrose traced to a pattern known in a small guild, the Courier Guild of House Court. The twist arrived concretely. The Courier Guild's symbol matched a watermark faintly pressed into the secondary sheet, a watermark that had not shown until humidity made the vellum translucent. Lucius' voice dropped. They expected someone with access to this workshop to find this. They timed the burns and the stitches to look accidental. Matteo's face went white. "Then my father's messenger was meant to be here. He only claimed the coin if the disc was found." Ambrose leaned forward. "Which means the map is bait. Which means someone wants it known to certain houses but not to others." The analyst realized the diagram served as a trap. An engineered disclosure that would set houses moving against one another once read. Confrontation followed. Matteo stood and paced, words short and raw. "I told my father I'd watch nothing. I did not think they would use stitches. I thought I would be rid of it." Ambrose cut him. "Then you lied. You lied to us and to yourself." Lucius' voice remained steady but cold. "We must decide now whether to disclose, to burn, or to hide." Each choice will move men. The analyst looked at the names. Menace, Dervan Court. He thought of routes, and how a map that matched comets to shipments could be turned into ambushes. His mind measured danger like a chemist weighing regents. He spoke, and his voice contained both logic and command. "We cannot leave this as bait," Matteo protested. "If we burn it, others will still have copies, and the pattern will leak." Ambrose replied, "If we publish, we arm houses with knowledge they can use to kill Lucia. If we hide it, someone will return for it." The three options stood like sharp tools. The analyst decided to split the map, copy the non-logistical symbols, and burn the transport columns. He ordered Matteo to hold the lamp while he traced the sigils with a fine quill onto a sheet of blank vellum. Matteo's hands shook, but he complied. Lucia inked dates into a ledger, and Ambrose sealed the astrolabe in a case, as if preserving an instrument for neutral custody. The analyst spoke in one-sentence directives: copy only the celestial correspondences, destroy the route columns. We store the copy in 3 distinct places. They worked fast and efficient. Outside, a cart rumbled past and bells chimed twice. The analyst felt time like pressure against a sealed bottle. Their actions had to be precise. A sudden, unexpected reveal came as Lucia held a copied sigil to the lamplight and found, pressed faintly into the vellum, a watermark she had not seen before. A small merchant mark belonging not to House Menace, but to the confraternity of glassmakers, a guild thought neutral. Lucia's jaw went slack. The confraternity is not neutral if they brand this. She brushed the mark and traced a finger along the ledger page where a name matched a glassmaker's foreman. They stitched a watermark into the sheet so only those who knew the trade could verify custody. Matteo swore under his breath, "My father has trade ties. He may have used the confraternity to launder this map." Ambrose barked. "Then this is deeper than houses. It is a network." The analyst's decision hardened. They had to decide whether to involve outside authorities. He chose to conceal the ledger in the astrolabe case, and to burn only the pages they had marked for destruction. His hands did not tremble when he sealed the flames against the shop's oilcloth. They burned in stages and recorded in a manner that left fewer clues. The analyst read aloud the inventory as each page turned to ash: 2 route columns destroyed, 1 secondary sheet incinerated, copy retained, celestial correspondences only. He paused and added, "Ledger hidden in astrolabe, copy to be split between safe places. Convent archive, Lucia's private chest, and my personal grimoire." Matteo swallowed. "If my father learns of this, he'll come for us," Ambrose replied. "Then we must be ready to deny knowledge and to hide evidence." Lucia set the last ember into a small iron box and hammered the lid shut. After the burning, they sat exhausted around the table. The morning had narrowed into decisions made physically: cutting stitches, lifting overlays, burning columns, hiding ledgers. The analyst rested his palms flat on the table and watched the 3 faces lit by lamplight and wet rain. None of them smiled. None of them trusted the others fully. The analyst's mind catalogued the betrayals and the pragmatic choices. He spoke in a single measured sentence: "We will not publish. We will not give the map to any house. We will act as custodians and as liars if necessary." Matteo's voice broke when he answered, "Then I will tell my father I burned it." Ambrose's laugh was a hard sound. "You will lie, Matteo, and we will keep the pieces." A final concrete event closed the chapter. Lucia stood, collected the copied celestial sheet, and pinned it in a lead-lined folder for safekeeping. Ambrose took the astrolabe and wrapped it in oilcloth, locking the leather strap. Matteo walked to the north window, placed his palm on the sill where the mud had dried, and scrubbed at the smear with the heel of his hand until his knuckles reddened. The analyst crossed the room to a shadowed cabinet, pried open a glass case, and slid the smallest remaining fragment of the burned corner behind a pane of glass he had prepared earlier. He did not speak as he sealed it. He felt the weight of decisions pressed into the room like a nailed board. The chapter ends on a concrete, situational beat. A short, Sharp knocks sounded at the outer door, while the analyst completed the glass seal, and Lucia froze with the lead folder half in hand. The knock was not tentative. Someone demanded entrance. The analyst set the fragment down, caught Matteo's eye, and mouthed, "Ambrose." Ambrose was already striding to the door. The knock came again, 3 firm strikes.